Hello, hello. It's January 17th, 2023. It's a SIG Node Sidecar working group meeting. Welcome, everybody. I think today's agenda will be quite short unless we'll stumble across um, some discussions. So I wanted to start discussing, like we have a CAP document. I think it's almost complete. The only questionable part at this moment is whether we support other types of restart policies on containers. So there are basically two questions. First question is whether we support restart policy on regular containers, not just init containers. And because container definition is currently shared, so if you add restart policy for init containers, they will almost automatically be on regular containers as well, unless we do some magic or some like bigger refactoring. And second question is, if we introduce restart policy always for init containers, do we need to introduce any other restart policies, or we just forbid people specifying those? And yeah, there is some discussion comments on this document. Unfortunately, like I only added my comments yesterday night. I was thinking about it for a long time, and I was trying to wrap my head around like how much we need to invest into that now, how much it will be future proof, and whether we will need it to whether we need to have it in the future. So let's have discussion open. First, let's maybe start with restart policy never and on failure for init containers. So today's behavior is, yeah, I put it here. Init containers will inherit restart policy of pod, but for always, there will be on failure instead of always, because there is no always for init containers. I mean, it's kind of, yeah. So when pod, when there is a job, like pod is a job that has a restart policy never, then failure of init container will fail the entire pod. If container, if pod specifies that it's always running, so it's always, then we will keep retrying the init containers forever unless it will succeed. That's the current behavior. And with introducing of always, we have we stumble into this interesting situation. This always behavior is not inherited from always of pod. So when pod is defined as always, standard init containers are still defined as on failure. So it's not it's different behaviors than regular pods and regular containers. Those some incompatibility. So like I think Joe wrote this here. So some semantic differences between always and always for regular containers and always for init containers. They're not inheritable from pod restart policy. And secondly, yeah, so there's a difference. And then there is a difference. What does never and on failure mean in terms of init containers? Like, do we ever want never for always pod? So do we ever want pod that was designed to be always running? So once scheduled, it will keep retrying and keep trying to run. And if we'll apply never to some init container, does it mean that this init container will be skipped? Or does it mean that we change the semantic of pod with restart policy always? Meaning that if pod has restart policy always, you still have a failure condition when pod will stop being retried, which is complicated. I don't know how many of you follow the discussion. Any thoughts?
I wrote my comments normally. But,
Joe, we can't hear you.
What are you trying to say? Something? No,
yeah, it looks like Joe, we cannot hear you, yes. Yeah, my comments were on the alternatives, not on the. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's good, Joe.
All right. Yeah. The only I think this is a really good topic. It gets even more complicated by the fact that deployments, when layered on top of pods, have things like imposing an always policy on the pod. And so if you had individual containers taking effects, not only would you have to think about all the impacts on pods, we'd have to think about all the impacts on deployments, which is like, I kind of almost makes my head explode. I'm tempted to say, like, for a very first alpha, we should commit to looking at all these things if the enhancement is useful, but I'm really hesitant to like start investing in figuring all this out when we're just trying to like prove a core idea. I don't know if that makes sense to other people, but that's kind of how I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, and I put it in naming consideration, like new addition here. We really, I mean, the reason we started using restart policy always is first, it kind of fits the definition, kind of fits the intent of this policy, and also it opens the door for these future scenarios. Like there are some scenarios that are important. Not all of them are important, but some. Like let's say you want to restart initialization for job that has a restart policy never. So it's fine to restart initialization for these pods, maybe. And expressing that may be interesting concept. But so we open this door, but then the question is, do we really have to open this door? And like, do we want to open this door? And is it future proof? Like all other scenarios will be really interesting and important. So alternative is to have some other property, like let's say, like ambient true or like something like that, that will change. I mean, that can be applied to both sides, like init containers and regular containers, and it will be only about making it run forever and restart always, but then don't block pod completion. So just express this thought with this new property, and don't open the door for these new scenarios. So I think Matthias commented here. Matthias.
Yeah, just a bit, but it was against the alternatives. So my feeling is that we should reuse the restart policy, and I don't like the other ones. But as Joe said, maybe we can just go with that in the alpha, and then if we have blockers, then we can invest more time in trying the alternatives.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in the KEP to keeping the alternatives that we thought of, either in like an alternatives considered section or somewhere, just so people that ask this question again, we can just kind of point them to and be like, yeah, no, we actually did think about that. Here's the pros and cons we listed. If you have other pros and cons or other thoughts, we're happy to add them to the KEP and that kind of stuff. I think that's really valuable. I feel like that kind of keeps us out of double jeopardy for a lot of things. But I think I'm in line with everybody else. I realize that it does kind of open the door to like, well, shouldn't it be possible for all containers to have all options? And right now they have none, and we're going to make one, and there might be others. So we'll probably have to like put in the like to beta section some kind of clarity on like what we're committing to add if we go all the way. Are we only committing to having always on init containers and that's it for all the way to GA for our feature? Or would we go a little bit further? Would we touch the main containers? I kind of want to stay away from the main containers entirely on this feature, but we probably have to make some kind of statement there on like, if we're in our first alpha, if we're only going to support one value on one flag, like are we going to go any further at all?
And you in favor of this property because it's easier to explain, or it's already there?
I think it makes init containers less special, which is kind of one of my goals is make it so that containers mostly, I mean, there are going to be differences, and there are going to be little bits of subtlety, but having like entirely new fields feels like we're diverging more than if we do this. I don't know if I could make a really compelling argument, but it's just kind of, I have this intuition that like once we start introducing fields that are per phase or per class of container, that's like a stronger divergence than if we just find a way to interpret a field that is in a way that's mostly aligned, but maybe is slightly different because of that mode.
I think, just to be devil advocate here, I will say later, but this field can be applied to both sides of containers. It can be both init containers and regular containers. And the idea would be that any container may be a sidecar. If you want to order it with init containers, you put it there. If you want to have it among all the containers, you just keep it in regular container section.
Interesting. That might be a little more surprising if the pod's restart policy is always, and then a container's restart policy is always. That might be a little more surprising if its behavior changes, whether or not you have the always flag on. That's
maybe separate flag. I don't think a flag always works in this case. So I'm just saying that if we don't, if we have strong concern that those scenarios with restart policy per container are really hard to implement in future and we may not need it ever, then the question will be like, if we will introduce new field, is it a better option, or what's the downside of introducing new field?
If you put a new field and you use it in all the containers, I don't mind that as much, honestly. If we introduce a flag field just for one type of container, then I feel that causes divergence where like, at that point, like it's hard to argue to anybody that you can't just have like completely different sets of fields on all the different kinds of containers and there's no relationship between them. And that feels really messy. And I think long-term is probably gonna be hard for users to cope with if like we have like init containers and ephemeral containers and main containers, and they're all very, very different.
Yeah, I'm with you on that aspect. I just like you did a good job of listing these properties, like what it will mean for init containers to have all this. But then I started thinking about scenarios, what we can support. And in reality, the only thing that makes sense is on failure for never pod. So this is the only scenario that makes sense. Other scenarios will be really hard to first implement and reconcile with existing behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, so we would basically have to put a validator and it says that you can, if you set this field on init containers, you can only set it to always. Even though the underlying enum might have other values, you just can't use them.
Yeah, and for regular containers, it will be a similar concept. It also will be not too much options that will be available unless we'll do some education of customers and reconciliation of existing behaviors.
Yeah,
especially around daemon sets. What is deployments? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of struggle writing any cons for this option for new field ambient true for all containers. I struggle to put like why it's not that. Except we open new scenarios with restart policy that people may benefit from, but we're not implementing the scenarios and don't even know how to implement those.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to think more about that one. I'm with you. I don't see as many cons to it. I'm not super excited. Maybe anybody else has thoughts?
This ambient is for all containers, like init and regular containers?
Yeah. And the only difference is for init containers, we'll wait for readiness, and for regular containers, we wouldn't.
Then people will ask, okay, if I want a sidecar, where do I put? Do I use this ambient in a init container or in a container? Or I see confusion here.
if you don't care about initialization stage, you do it in regular containers. If you want to order yourself with init containers, you do it init stage. Yeah, that may be the only negative. Like people will have hard time to decide.
I think it is a real con, like potential for confusion. People like, they see the ambient thing. The first thing they do if they haven't read all the fine print is just go add a container that's ambient. And then later they realize, oh, if I'd just put it in the init containers, I wouldn't have had all these weird startup problems.
And then if you want to inject automatically sidecars, then you need to look at both lists. Like, do I have it in the init? No, I have it in the containers. So yes, no, I don't know. Maybe it's more difficult.
I don't think injector will have any problems, right? So injector will know what you want for this container.
No, but sometimes injectors, you need to check what is already existing, and if you want to insert yourself before or after, or if.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess we need to check two lists. Okay. Yeah, and I also, for naming, I also put some consideration for collection name. Like init container is not the ideal name for sidecar. It's really hard to explain why my login container is a init container. So I was thinking, but we really want ordering with other init containers. So one option would be to introduce a new collection that will supersede init containers, something like infrastructure containers or something like that. And then idea would be that, let's say init containers run first and all the, or like maybe second, like infrastructure containers run first, then all init containers run. But the recommendation is only use infrastructure container collection. But I think I put it here in the alternative saying that we can always come to this decision after alpha. So
yeah,
nothing blocks us from doing that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to just getting something out there for people to use. And some of these things, like honestly, there's the APIs have been accumulating cruft for a while. And if there is ever a V2, we would probably clean up all of this, but it might be better to just minimize the amount of complexity we add now, even if it has some warts, and just kind of keep going.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with you, Joe. To me, this screams like pod V2.
Yeah, it's like if we ever did V2, this is like, I don't know, maybe there's a list somewhere I need where it's like this stuff I would do if we ever did a V2, and I would just put this on that list and then just forget about it for a decade.
Forget about
Someday.
it for the next 10 years. Okay. So, okay. If nobody has problems with init containers, it's fine. At least we can explain why.
Yeah, I think it's really good to have these discussions and put the rationale down, because I guarantee you, like every different way you could do this, somebody's going to come ask us why we didn't do it that way.
Okay. Yeah, and I see termination stage is described now, and we have cap PR also filled out. So I think we're in a good shape on cap.
Great. Yeah, I'll do one more pass. I had a talk and had a couple questions I wanted to answer, and I'll just +1. I think some of the other stuff on there looks great.
Okay. And I also looked at all the open questions. Let's move it here.
Okay.
Joe, I think Tim put some questions on Saturday night.
Yeah.
Or Friday night.
Yeah. I owe a pass. I'm going to do that today. I think most of it is just like me agreeing on like what we might do when we get to beta, hopefully. So I don't think it's blocker, but I will do a pass on that today and try and clear it up.
Okay. So naming, we just discussed it. I think we closed on it mostly. I mean, yeah, let's see what feedback we'll get from other people.
Yeah.
Terminating ordering, we have discussed. We don't do ordering now.
Yeah, I'll try and give a little more explanation to what that would look like if we did do real ordering, so that when people ask, we'll be like, yeah, we're not going to do anything in alpha, but in beta, if we get there, these are some of the options we have. And all the options are backwards compatible, so we'll be able to add them.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the point of team, like shutdown ordering.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got like one really lightweight alternative that nobody's happy with and 3 heavier weight alternatives. So I'll have to like pick one that I'm gonna like try and back and say, if we do termination ordering, this is what it's gonna look like.
So is there no ordering at least in alpha?
It might actually be one of the harder things to do when we get to beta, but hopefully we can get to alpha without it.
Okay.
I think you can prove that you are strictly better for all existing users if you get an alpha even without it.
Okay, handling backward compatibility. I think we discussed it already. So I'm not sure if we. Yeah, I think I put a section about backward compatibility there. So it should be good. Yeah. And
yeah, I do expect the community to keep us busy once we post this CAP. I expect a lot of questions. So.
Yeah, I went to PR meeting last Thursday. I mean, it's good to promote that we're about to do that. And also they said that they don't see all those questions I raised as blockers for alpha. So we should be good to go from that perspective. But it's something that we need to answer when we go to beta and so forth. And they also said that likely it will be a long way forward. Like it will be many releases before we can release it because of version queues and such.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are getting told right now with features, especially anything that touches Node, I would expect.
Yeah. So this is still not done. I will ping Francesca and Swati if they can help us.
Okay.
It's a complicated topic. It's a CPU manager and resource manager. CPU and topology manager. Like how do we allocate resources and whether sidecars introduce any new problems that we didn't anticipate. Still open.
Okay.
How users can cause troubles. We have a section in CAP. And by the way, I added another trouble scenario there. Trouble. Configure. How would I search for it? I don't remember words. Oh yeah, here. Yeah, remember I put something new, but I forgot. Oh yeah, this one. So something that we haven't considered before, but something that people may start using. So imagine you have 2 initialization tasks today. Like people has like maybe downloading some big file to use and also installing some certificates. We can open gates for people start using initialization like sidecar containers to do initialization in parallel. So today, the only option you have is to do a sequencing of these initialization stages. People might start saying like, I want to do faster startup, so I want to initialization task to run in parallel. And they will start abusing sidecars by running a lot of them. Basically, every initialization, like, what's the downside for user to do initialization stage in parallel as a sidecar? They typically wouldn't exceed resources of main container, so they can use a lot of resources. And yeah, so they can like have some balloon init container or something like that, and then start doing some synchronization on all initialization tasks complete. So instead of synchronizing today on termination, they will start synchronizing on initialization just to make containers start faster. I don't know. I mean, this is definitely an abuse, not something we intend people to to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how bad it will be and how much of a headache we'll have is people start asking us to do synchronization natively supported in kubelet. So give us
That's a really good
call
question.
back when all initialization completed or something like that.
Yeah. I think it's a good one to call out. I think we mitigate it a little bit by the fact that like you're going to get billed in your resource consumption for sidecars differently than a normal init container. So you're going to get charged more basically because it's going to run the whole time, or it's assumed to run the whole time. So that's a little bit of an incentive for people to be, at least people that are cost sensitive, to not like do this unnecessarily. Yeah, I don't know what to say about the built-in synchronization primitives. Yeah, people might start asking for stuff like that. It's a risk.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think it's something that will block CAP from executing, but and I don't know what to do to prevent this situation.
Yeah.
Any sort of randomization of execution or anything, like nothing will help. Like it's how sidecars are designed.
Yeah, it's not totally worse than like if you'd wanted to do it today and you just put it in a main container and found some way to get things to like wait on each other. You could do something weird like that today. I don't know if it's like people can do weird stuff. Like I don't know how far we need to go on like keeping them from doing that.
Oh yeah, you're right. So people can just do regular containers. Okay. Yeah.
Sergey, I got a question about the overall direction I'm seeing here, since this is my first attended meeting. It seems odd to me that we're discussing init containers and like redoing init containers when it seems it would be more effective to have a project to fix init containers and do sidecars without lumping them all into one project. It just seems so complicated. The discussions we've been having here today are confusing and complicated.
Yeah, the main motivation here is, I mean, first we want easy way to inject containers into any pod. So we want to, there are many patterns where like metrics or proxy containers being injected with webhooks. So we need to have an easy way to inject them. And that's what we started with. Like, let's say, let's have another collection of containers that will be sidecars. And this collection will be easy to inject. But then many people have concerns with initialization stage versus sidecars. So this is a pattern that some containers use. They need a certificate to be downloaded first, and they have special providers for that. And then they want to run proxy. So they need proxy to run before all other init containers because they will provide the MTLS version of secure communication. But also they can't run it before this container because they don't have a certificate yet. So yeah, we want to solve this scenario, and the need to solve this scenario led us to this complicated road.
Yeah, and another way that I think about it, I don't know if this helps, Brian, is that the API is already complicated, and I think there's been like upwards of like 4 or 5, I don't know, Sergey might have a count of different alternatives have been proposed to do this, all of which change the API in some way. And they've all had just like these long laundry lists of problems that they cause for the API. So the one attractive property this design has is that because it's less invasive to the API, it circumvents a lot of those problems. It is a little less obvious than some of the other solutions, but it kind of has that nice property of being kind of like uninvasive to the API.
All right, thanks. I better read that doc.
Yeah, the history here is kind of like it's a lot to get through, and I was pretty surprised at some of the solutions being proposed, and then once you read the history, you're starting to like maybe, and I would love to hear your thoughts on like if you think of something else, because there are a lot of ways to come at this one, but this one at least seems to like check a bunch of boxes that are hard to check.
So who's gonna present the history of this at KubeCon?
That would be kind of fun. 30 different ways to do sidecars.
Can I give my initial perspective, having heard the discussions, but having missed so many? I guess I want to give my perspective.
Sure.
It seems like this is heading in the direction of something that's going to be large, complicated, and perhaps never get involved, actually merged because it's just too big. Whereas if it was like tactical new features to the existing operations, it would begin to be operational and used pretty quickly, and perhaps before Kubernetes is like out of date. I worry it'll take almost forever to accomplish what I've heard discussed here today.
Yeah, we tried, like when I joined Kubernetes 3 years back, the first cap trying to introduce sidecar containers was rejected. And it was rejected specifically for this reason that you outlined just now. So saying, can we get to the more tactical first step towards sidecar containers? And then we have, like last release, we had a very small change that we thought it's tactical and easy to implement. And it was rejected for the reason that we need to think about things holistically. So we're thinking holistically now, and since we went through whole loop from whole cycle, I think most of people who are making decisions will be fine with that. And from code perspective, I'm scared myself. So I frightened how many changes we'll need to make in so many places. So I think the biggest question will be, can we make all the changes such a way that it doesn't break any existing scenarios? So it should all be protected with feature gates, double protected, triple protected. So we need to be really careful about it.
Thanks. Excellent explanation. Thanks.
Yeah, the rollouts are really difficult on these things. We're now at a point in Kubernetes where like we release 3 times a year and we support 3 releases back. So anything that we roll out that impacts Node, we're basically at more than a year. It doesn't even matter like what design we pick. Like if we do anything that changes Node, it's going to be more than a year before you have any hope of getting into GA. Just if you just draw out the diagram of like, I make even the most trivial change to Node that the rest of the system depends on, then like the rollout's super slow. So I'm tempted to just like get started with this kind of like minimal change, but it's going to be a wait, unfortunately. I don't know how to make that faster.
I think there are so many like smart people that really want this feature that we will have enough hands to implement it.
Yeah, one of the good news about this one is I think a lot of the complexity is describing potential interactions with all the other things that happen in Kubernetes. The actual core feature itself is one of the simpler. Like you have an existing flag, but now it's on containers. If you set it to always, the thing just keeps running instead of terminating. So the logic is actually pretty simple at like if you explain it to a user. But then it's just like reasoning through all the interactions with all the other parts of the system is where the complexity happens. I'm worried that like the system's just big enough that you can't like totally avoid that. But hopefully as like the design matures, we'll figure out that a bunch of this doesn't actually matter as much and kind of put it off to the side and have like a core idea that makes sense. But it takes time to get there.
Okay. Any other comments from a call? See. Okay, then let's give ourselves 20 more minutes. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks. See you.
Thanks.